At some point today, you probably told yourself something. Maybe it was a reminder. Maybe it was a comment about something you saw. Maybe it was an argument you were having with someone, rehearsed quietly, in your own head, in your own voice, in the few seconds before you said it out loud. That voice, the one running in the background, the one narrating your life, forming your thoughts into words, talking you through decisions, replaying conversations, keeping up a constant quiet commentary on everything you experience. You know exactly what that is. You've heard it your entire life, except some people haven't. Not once. Not ever. There is a percentage of the human population, researchers currently estimate somewhere between 25 and 30%, who have no inner monologue, no voice in their head, no internal narrator. When they think, they don't think in words. They think in something else. Feelings, shapes, abstract impressions, images, pure knowing, without any verbal layer running over the top of it. No sentences, no self-talk, no mental voice reading these words back to them as they go. And the strangest part of this story isn't that they exist, it's that until extremely recently, neither group knew the other one was different. People with an inner monologue assumed everyone had one, because why would you ever question something so constant, so automatic, so completely invisible that you've never once had to notice it? And people without one assumed the same thing from the other direction, that hearing a voice in your head was just a figure of speech, a metaphor, not something that was literally happening to the person next to them. For most of human history, this difference went completely undetected. No one asked. No one checked. And then one day in 2020, someone posted about it on the internet, and millions of people had a crisis at the same time. The post that broke everything was simple. A person on social media asked casually whether other people actually heard a voice in their head when they thought, or whether that was just an expression. Within hours, the comment section had turned into something nobody expected. Half the people responding were saying yes, obviously, constantly, it never stops. And the other half were saying, "What? Wait, that actually happens? You literally hear a voice? Like an actual voice in words, forming sentences all the time." The confusion was immediate and mutual. People who had inner voices were stunned that anyone could possibly think without one. People who didn't have them were equally stunned that the thing they'd always assumed was a metaphor was apparently a literal, continuous, real auditory-like experience happening inside other people's heads at every waking moment. Neither side had any idea. This phenomenon, the presence or absence of an inner speaking voice, is called inner speech, and a psychologist named Russell Hurlburt has spent decades studying it, using a method called descriptive experience sampling. He gives participants a small device that beeps at random intervals throughout the day. Every time it beeps, they have to stop immediately and report exactly what was happening in their consciousness at that precise moment, not what they were thinking about generally. What was actually occurring in their experience. Right then, in that exact second, before they had time to reconstruct or interpret it. What he found is that inner experience varies between people far more than anyone had assumed. Some people do have a near-constant verbal inner monologue, a running voice commenting on everything. Others have inner speech occasionally but not constantly. And a significant portion of people have essentially none. Their thinking happens in other modes entirely, without any verbal layer. And here's what makes this genuinely strange from a scientific standpoint. Nobody knows what that means for how those people actually think. Here's the question that researchers have been struggling with ever since this became a serious subject of study. If you don't have an inner voice, what does thinking actually feel like? People who lack inner speech struggle to explain it to people who have it, not because they're unable to articulate it, but because the experience seems to not translate cleanly into words. Some describe it as just knowing things without a verbal step in between. Some describe thinking in feelings, an emotional sense of a concept without the language layer. Some describe visual thinking, thoughts that come as images, diagrams, spatial relationships rather than sentences. Some describe it as simply doing, without any conscious verbal mediation between intention and action. And this connects to something else entirely, which is where the story gets really strange. Around the same time the inner monologue debate was exploding online, another discovery was going viral for similar reasons. A condition called aphantasia, the complete inability to form mental images. People with aphantasia cannot picture things in their mind. If you tell them to imagine an apple, there is no apple. No image. No visual representation of any kind. Just the concept of an apple, held in some abstract non-visual way that people who can visualize find nearly impossible to understand. Aphantasia was only formally identified and named in 2015 by a neurologist named Adam Zeman at the University of Exeter. Before that, there was no word for it. People who had it simply assumed that picturing something in your mind was a figure of speech, the same assumption people without inner speech made about the mental voice. And just like the inner monologue revelation, the discovery that some people genuinely cannot visualize anything triggered a wave of people suddenly realizing that their inner experience had been fundamentally different from the people around them their entire life, with no one ever noticing. Some people have neither. No inner voice and no mental imagery. They move through life thinking entirely in something that neither of those groups can access or describe. Now here's where the science gets uncomfortable. Almost everything psychology has assumed about how humans think is built on the assumption that thinking and language are deeply connected. The dominant model for most of the 20th century held that internal speech was essential to higher-order cognition, that you needed the verbal layer to reason, plan, hold abstract thoughts, and reflect on your own mental states. Inner speech wasn't just a side effect of thought, it was thought. But that model has a serious problem now. If 25 to 30% of people have little or no inner speech, and those people are capable of reasoning, planning, problem-solving, and reflective thinking at the same level as everyone else, which they clearly are, then inner speech isn't essential to any of those things. It's one mode of thinking, not the only one, and possibly not even the most common one. Hurlburt's research suggests that the percentage of people with a constant inner monologue is actually much lower than most people assume. Even among people who report having an inner voice, when you catch them with the random beep method, in the actual moment, before they have time to reconstruct what they think their thinking looks like, the verbal inner monologue is often absent. People believe they have a constant inner voice, but when you check what's actually happening in real time, many of them are thinking in something else and then narrating it afterwards, which raises a genuinely unsettling question. How much of what you believe about your own inner experience is actually happening, and how much of it is a story your brain tells you after the fact? Here's what all of it actually means. For the entirety of recorded human civilization, we have been assuming that the basic texture of conscious experience is roughly the same for everyone. That when we say, "I was thinking about something," we all mean approximately the same kind of thing. That the inside of one human mind works more or less like the inside of another. That assumption is wrong. The difference between a person with a constant inner monologue and a person with no inner speech at all isn't a preference or a personality trait. It's a fundamentally different mode of being conscious, a genuinely different architecture of inner experience, and the same is true for mental imagery. The difference between someone who can close their eyes and see a photographic mental image in full color and detail, and someone for whom closing their eyes produces complete mental darkness, is not a small variation on the same experience. It is a different experience entirely, and neither group knew the other existed until the internet accidentally revealed it, which means one of the most basic things you could ask about another person. What does it feel like to be inside your head? Has an answer that varies between humans so dramatically that people who hear it from the other side often can't believe it's real. People with vivid mental imagery have told aphantasics they must be doing it wrong. People with inner monologues have told those without one that they must be suppressing it somehow. The assumption that other people's minds work like yours is so automatic, so deep, so completely unexamined that the evidence against it still lands as a shock every time. Right now, there are people in your life whose entire inner experience is built differently than yours. People who have never once heard a voice in their head. People who have never once seen an image behind their eyes. People who think in a way you have no direct access to and possibly cannot meaningfully imagine. You've been talking to them your whole life. You just never thought to ask.